The look in my husband's eyes told me everything was over. That evening, rain covered the streets of Chicago in a gray haze. Water tapped against the kitchen windows, making the silence inside the room feel even heavier. I stood near the stove, turning off the chicken I had prepared for dinner. My husband, Daniel, sat on the other side of the kitchen table with his arms crossed over his chest. Beside him was a woman I had never seen in our home before. She looked about 35, with long blonde hair and an expensive white coat. She sat there as if she belonged. She was even drinking coffee from my favorite mug. I looked at the 3 plates on the table. "Who is she?" I asked. Daniel looked away. "Her name is Vanessa." "I can see that. What is she doing in our house?" The woman slowly placed the mug on the table. There was a faint smile of victory on her lips. Daniel stood up. "Emily, we need to talk." Nothing good ever follows those 4 words. Daniel and I had been married for 12 years. I met him during my final year of college. Back then, he had $10 in his pocket and dreams that seemed larger than the world. I believed in those dreams. When he started his first company, I worked 2 jobs. In the mornings, I was an administrator at a medical center. In the evenings, I waited tables at a restaurant. While Daniel met with investors, I paid the rent, bought groceries, and covered the bills. When his company finally became successful, I believed his success belonged to both of us. But now my husband was looking at me like I was a stranger. "I'm in love with Vanessa," he said. I said nothing. Daniel continued. "We've been together for 6 months." 6 months? For 6 months, he had told me he was working late. He said he had meetings with clients. He traveled for business. And I believed him. 6 months? I whispered. I didn't want it to happen like this. Vanessa sighed. She did not look sorry. She only looked impatient, as if she wanted this conversation to end. "Emily," Daniel said, "let's not make this difficult. You've been lying to me, and now you're telling me not to make this difficult?" His expression hardened. "There's no need to yell." "I'm not yelling." What frightened me most was how calm my voice sounded. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out several folded papers. I filed for divorce. He placed them on the table. Vanessa avoided my eyes, but I could tell she had been waiting for this moment. "There's something else," Daniel said. "Of course there is." He cleared his throat. "You need to pack your things and leave tonight." For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. "What did you say?" "This situation is uncomfortable for everyone. Vanessa is going to move in with me." I let out a quiet laugh. "You're throwing me out of my own home?" Daniel's face turned cold. "I've been paying for this house." "Have you?" "My company pays the mortgage. The utility bills come from my account. So, yes, this is my house." I leaned against the edge of the table. My heartbeat seemed to slow. The grief inside me was replaced by something else. It was not anger. It was clarity. "And what happens if I refuse to leave?" I asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "I'll have to call the police." That was the moment I understood. Our marriage was truly over. Maybe I could have forgiven the affair. I did not know. But he had threatened to call the police to remove me from the home we had shared for 12 years. "All right," I said. Daniel looked relieved. Vanessa's victorious smile returned. "I'll pack my things." As I walked upstairs, I heard them whispering. "I told you she wouldn't make a scene," Daniel said. "She's calmer than I expected," Vanessa replied. They believed I had accepted defeat. But there was something they did not know. The house had never been in Daniel's name. It belonged entirely to me. I entered the bedroom and closed the door. The room we had shared for 12 years suddenly felt like a museum. Our wedding photograph hung on the wall. In it, 24-year-old Emily rested her head on her husband's shoulder and smiled as though she had everything she could ever want. I did not recognize that girl anymore. I opened the closet and pulled out a large black suitcase. I began placing a few dresses and personal belongings inside. But I was not really planning to leave. I only needed time. My grandmother, Margaret Hall, had been a very wise woman. When I was young, she often said, "Love someone deeply, but never give them every key to your life." I did not understand what she meant until after I got married. When my grandmother died, she left me some money and her old house outside Chicago. I sold the property and placed the money into an investment account. A few years later, the money had nearly doubled. When Daniel's company began doing well, we started looking for a larger home. At the time, he was having financial problems. His credit history was poor, and his company carried significant debt. So I purchased the house with money from my inheritance. On the advice of my attorney, the property was placed only in my name. Daniel did not object. "We can add my name later," he had said, but he never mentioned it again. As the years passed, ownership stopped feeling important. We were a family. Daniel paid the mortgage, and I cared for the house, supported his mother, and organized every holiday. I considered his income ours. He considered my house his. I picked up my phone and called Sarah Klein, the daughter of the attorney who had handled my grandmother's estate. Sarah now ran her father's law firm. She answered after the second ring. "Emily, it's late. Is everything all right?" "No." My voice shook. "Daniel wants a divorce. He brought another woman into the house, and now he's telling me to leave." Sarah was silent for several seconds. "Does he know the house is in your name?" "I think he forgot." "Is anyone else listed on the deed?" "No." "Did you sign anything during refinancing?" "No." "Then legally, the house belongs to you." I sat on the bed. He threatened to call the police. "Let him. The police cannot remove the legal owner from her own home. In fact, you can ask them to remove the other woman." "What about Daniel?" "Since he is your husband, his right to remain there may be more complicated. But that woman has no legal right to the property." I closed my eyes. "Sarah, I don't want a confrontation tonight." "That's smart. Stay somewhere safe. Come to my office tomorrow morning. I'll prepare the documents." "If I leave tonight, can he take the house?" "Not overnight, but photograph your valuables and all important documents. We don't know what he may do." After I ended the call, I stopped packing and began taking pictures of every room: jewelry, family documents, silverware from my grandmother, paintings on the walls. I also photographed the papers in Daniel's home office. Inside one of the desk drawers, I found an envelope. On the front were the words, "Lakeview Property Transfer." Inside was a preliminary contract for the sale of the house. Daniel's name was listed as the seller. The buyer was an investment company owned by Vanessa Reed. I froze. Daniel was planning to sell my house behind my back. Did he truly believe he owned it? Or was he planning to forge my signature? Then I saw the signature at the bottom. It looked like mine. But I had never signed that document. When I went downstairs, Daniel and Vanessa were drinking wine in the living room. I placed my suitcase near the door. Daniel stood. "Where are you going?" "To a hotel." "Good decision." His words cut through me again. After 12 years of marriage, that was all he had to say. Vanessa sat on the couch with her legs crossed. "Emily," she said in a falsely gentle voice, "if I were you, I would try to handle this in a civilized way." I turned toward her. "You have never been in my position." Her smile disappeared. "What is that supposed to mean?" "I built a life in this house. I stood beside Daniel when he had nothing. You came after the money and status arrived. Daniel stepped between us. That's enough." "No," I said. "I only want to know one thing. Did he promise you this house?" Vanessa looked at Daniel. That brief reaction told me everything. Yes, he had promised her my home. That's none of your business, Daniel said. Interesting. I opened the door. We'll talk tomorrow. You can send everything to my attorney, he said. Before stepping outside, I looked back one last time. Vanessa sat on my couch. Daniel stood in the doorway of my house. They believed they had won. I drove to a nearby hotel and tried to sleep, but I was awake all night. At 3 in the morning, I received an alert from the bank. $120,000 had been transferred from our joint account. I called the bank immediately. The overnight representative said the transfer could not be stopped yet, but the account could be flagged for possible fraud. The money had been moved to Daniel's company. Everything began to make sense. This was not only an affair. Daniel had prepared for the divorce. He had removed our money. He had prepared documents to sell the house. He planned to remove me and share everything with Vanessa. At 7 in the morning, I called Sarah. An hour later, I was sitting in her office. She studied the papers carefully. This signature is not yours. No. Can you prove that? I had never seen this document before last night. Sarah examined the signature. We will need a handwriting expert, but if it is proven to be forged, this could become a criminal matter, not only a civil one. Could Daniel go to prison? If he attempted to sell property illegally using forged documents, yes. I did not feel relieved. Punishing him would not return 12 years of my life. Sarah opened her laptop and searched the county property records. A few seconds later, she turned the screen toward me. There it is. The house is still fully in your name. No lien, transfer, or new ownership has been recorded. I took a deep breath. What do we do now? First, we freeze the accounts. Then we place a fraud alert on the property. After that, we send Daniel formal notice. What kind of notice? Sarah looked directly at me. We inform him that he has no right to represent himself as the owner, and we order Vanessa to leave the property. Today? Today. That afternoon, Sarah and I returned to the house. A private security officer and a legal process server came with us. When we entered the driveway, I saw a moving truck outside. 2 workers were carrying Vanessa's boxes into the house. I had been gone for one night. She had already moved in. I unlocked the front door with my key. Vanessa was in the living room, removing my family photographs from the walls. What are you doing here? She demanded. I came home. Daniel walked out of the kitchen. Emily, I told you we would communicate through our attorneys. That's why we're here. Sarah stepped forward. Daniel Brooks? Yes. The process server handed him the documents. You have been formally served. Daniel accepted the papers. At first, he looked unconcerned. Then his expression began to change. What is this? Sarah answered calmly. This property is the separate legal property of Emily Hall Brooks. You are not the owner, and you have no authority to sell it or transfer it to a third party. Vanessa froze. What is she talking about? Daniel flipped through the pages. This is impossible. Property records are public, Sarah said. The house was purchased 10 years ago with funds from Emily's inheritance. Only her name appears on the deed. Daniel looked at me. You were supposed to add my name. You never asked. I paid the mortgage. Sarah interrupted him. Mortgage payments may be considered marital contributions, but they do not automatically make you the owner. Vanessa moved closer to Daniel. You told me the house was yours. I thought it was. You thought? Her voice rose. You told me you were selling it to my company. I already transferred the deposit. The room went silent. Sarah glanced at me. What deposit? She asked. Vanessa realized her mistake. Nothing. That statement may be significant, Sarah said. We have a sales agreement containing Emily's forged signature. Daniel's hands began to shake. You searched my office. I checked a room inside my own home. That document was only a draft. Then why is my signature on it? Daniel said nothing. Vanessa stared at him in disgust. Did you forge her signature? It was only a formality. Those words destroyed the last remaining part of me that had hoped there was some explanation. He considered stealing my home a formality. Sarah handed Vanessa another document. You are being ordered to leave the property immediately. You are neither a tenant nor a legal resident. Vanessa refused to take the paper. I'm not going anywhere. Then the police will be called. Daniel stepped toward me. Emily, you don't have to do this. Last night you ordered me to leave this exact house. I said it in anger. No. You prepared divorce papers. You moved our money. You tried to sell the house. This was not anger. It was a plan. He lowered his voice. We can solve this privately. We lived privately for 12 years. You destroyed that in one night. That evening, Vanessa packed her belongings again. Before leaving, she stepped close to me. Don't think you've won, she whispered. I'm not competing with you. Daniel doesn't love you anymore. The words hurt, but I did not let her see it. Maybe not, but he doesn't love you either. A man who loves you does not lie to you and involve you in fraud. Vanessa left without another word. Daniel slept in the guest room that night. I locked the bedroom door from the inside. For the first time in my life, I had to protect myself from my husband inside my own home. The divorce proceedings began the following week. Daniel hired an expensive attorney. He claimed the house was marital property because the mortgage had been paid during the marriage. But Sarah was prepared. The down payment had come entirely from my inheritance. The property documents were only in my name. My grandmother had also left the inheritance under special protective terms. Daniel might have been entitled to limited reimbursement for some contributions, but he could not take the house. However, the house turned out to be the smallest part of the problem. Sarah hired a forensic accountant. When he reviewed Daniel's company records, he discovered the business had lost millions of dollars over the previous 2 years. Daniel had hidden everything from me. He had been using money from new investors to repay older investors. The company was close to collapse. Even worse, Daniel planned to use the money from the sale of my house to cover the company's debts. Vanessa's investment firm had agreed to buy the property far below market value. After that, they intended to renovate it and resell it for nearly twice the amount. This was not simply about beginning a new life together. They planned to use my property to solve their financial problems. He intended to complete the sale quickly after forcing you out, Sarah explained. But how could a notary approve the documents without me? Sarah looked at me carefully. Perhaps they had a notary they trusted. During the investigation, another name appeared. Michael Reed, Vanessa's brother. He was a licensed notary. The stamp on the sales agreement belonged to him. Michael had certified that I signed the document in front of him. I had never met Michael Reed in my life. Sarah filed an official police report. The case was sent to the Financial Crimes Division. When Daniel found out, he exploded. He came into the kitchen and confronted me. You contacted the police? Yes. I'm your husband. You forged my signature. I did everything for us. I stared at him. For us? You threw me out and moved another woman in. I had to save the company. So you tried to steal my house. I paid for that house for 10 years. And who paid for our life when you were building your company? Who covered the rent while you chased investors? Who drove your mother to the hospital? Who used part of her grandmother's money to furnish your first office? Daniel fell silent. I supported you, I said. You mistook that support for weakness. I made a mistake. You did not make one mistake. You lied for 6 months, you moved money, you prepared false documents, you forged my signature, then you tried to throw me out. He moved closer. Withdraw the police report. No? Emily, I could lose everything. My eyes filled with tears. And what were you trying to take from me? He had no answer. A few days later, I received a message from an unknown number. We need to meet. Daniel cannot know. It was Vanessa. At first, I did not want to respond, but Sarah advised me to meet her in a public place. We met at a small coffee shop in downtown Chicago. Vanessa no longer looked confident. Her hair was tied back, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes. She placed a brown envelope on the table. There are things you need to know about Daniel. I did not touch it. Why are you helping me? She gave a bitter laugh. I'm not helping you. I'm protecting myself. You were involved in his plan. I did not know the house was not his. But you plan to buy it below market value. Daniel told me you had agreed to the divorce. He said the two of you were selling the house together. What about my forged signature? Vanessa looked down. I learned about that later. And you still did nothing. She remained silent. What's inside the envelope? I asked. Daniel's financial records. He moved money through my company. I thought they were legal investments, but some of the transfers have no clear source. Why should I trust you? Don't. Give the papers to your lawyer. She started to stand, then sat down again. There's something else? What? Daniel did not begin planning the divorce 6 months ago. He started 2 years ago. My hand went still. Why do you say that? When we first met, he told me he was separated. He said the house was his, the company was successful, and the divorce was nearly final. You said you had been together for 6 months. The physical relationship began 6 months ago, but we met 2 years ago. That truth hurt more than the affair itself. During those 2 years, I had helped bury Daniel's father. I had stayed beside his mother during surgery. I had organized the 10th anniversary celebration for his company. And during all of it, he was planning a future with someone else. Does he love you? I asked. Vanessa looked into my eyes. I thought he did. And now? Now I understand that Daniel only loves himself. She left. The documents inside the envelope showed that Daniel had moved company money illegally, but the final page contained something I had not expected. Daniel had applied for a $500,000 loan in my name. He listed my house as collateral. The bank had rejected the application because they required the property owner to appear in person. That was why Daniel turned to the sale through Vanessa's company. If the bank had not checked carefully, I could have lost the house and been left with enormous debt. 3 months later, the divorce case reached court. The courtroom was cold and brightly lit. Daniel sat across from me in an expensive black suit, but he no longer looked powerful. His company had filed for bankruptcy. Investors had sued him. The police had opened an official investigation into the forged property documents. Daniel's attorney demanded a share of the house. He argued that Daniel had paid the mortgage for 10 years and funded renovations. Sarah stood. Your Honor, we do not deny that Mr. Brooks made financial contributions to the property during the marriage. However, the home was purchased with Emily Hall Brooks's separate inheritance. Furthermore, Mr. Brooks attempted to sell the property without the owner's knowledge. Sarah placed the forged agreement on the table. This document contains a forged signature. A notary certified that Emily signed it in his presence. However, on that date, Emily was attending a medical conference in another state. We have hotel records, airline tickets, and security footage. The judge looked at Daniel. Mr. Brooks, are you familiar with this document? Daniel looked at his attorney. It was only a preliminary draft. Drafts are not notarized, the judge said. Daniel's attorney stood quickly. My client invokes his right not to answer questions related to the criminal investigation. The judge nodded. Sarah then presented the transfer of $120,000 from our joint account. This money was moved into Mr. Brooks's company on the same day he filed for divorce. Daniel's lawyer argued that the money had been used to cover business debts. The judge replied, transferring marital funds into a private company without a spouse's consent is not normal financial conduct. At the end of the hearing, the judge confirmed that the house was my separate property. Daniel was given limited credit for some documented contributions, but the money he removed from the joint account and the other financial misconduct nearly erased that amount. The house remained mine. Daniel was ordered to return the money he had transferred. His business debts were not assigned to me. When the judge read the decision, I did not celebrate. I closed my eyes and breathed. It felt as if I had not only recovered the house, I had recovered my life. Outside the courtroom, Daniel followed me. "Emily." I stopped. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "Is this really how we end?" For a moment, I heard the voice of the young man I had once loved, the man whose dreams I believed in. But that person had disappeared long ago. "I did not end us," I said. "You did, I only accepted it. I never wanted to hurt you. You knew your actions would hurt me. You simply did not care." His eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid the company was collapsing. I thought I would lose everything." "So you decided to take everything from me?" He said nothing. "Goodbye, Daniel." I turned and walked down the courthouse steps. This time, no one stopped me. The first few months after the divorce were difficult. Every room reminded me of my old life: his seat at the kitchen table, the couch in the living room, our wedding photographs near the staircase. I did not change everything immediately. First, I removed the photographs. Later, I painted the bedroom. I sold the dark furniture Daniel had chosen and replaced it with lighter pieces. I had not only reclaimed the house, I was making it mine again. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. Daniel's mother, Linda, stood outside. She had not spoken to me since the divorce. "May I come in?" she asked. I let her inside. She handed me an old box. "These should belong to you." Inside were old photographs of Daniel and me, letters, and small pieces of jewelry. "How is he?" I asked. "Not well." Daniel had partially admitted responsibility in the financial fraud case and reached an agreement with prosecutors. He received probation, community service, and a large fine. Michael lost his notary license. Vanessa closed her company and moved to another state. "He wants to apologize," Linda said. "An apology cannot change everything." "I know." Linda wiped her tears. "I did not realize my son had become this kind of man." "Neither did I." She held my hand. "You were a good wife to him." Hearing those words released something inside me. I tried to be a good wife, but I forgot to be good to myself. After Linda left, I looked through the box. I found a letter Daniel had written during college. "One day, I will buy you a beautiful house. You will never have to be afraid of anything." I stared at those words for a long time. Daniel had not bought me a house. I bought it myself. And I taught myself not to be afraid. 1 year later, I transformed the unused first floor of the house into a small center offering legal and financial guidance to women. We helped women facing financial abuse, women in danger of losing their homes, and women trying to rebuild their lives after divorce. I named the center Margaret House, after my grandmother. Sarah stood beside me on opening day. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," she said. I looked at the sign above the entrance. I think she prepared me for this. That evening, after the guests had left, I stood alone outside the house. The sun was setting, and warm light shone through the windows. Once I had stood at that same door, holding a suitcase. My husband had told me, "Leave this house." He thought I was weak. He mistook my silence for fear. He mistook my love for dependence. But there was something he never understood. Owning a house is not only about having your name on a deed, it is about owning your own life, knowing your worth. Understanding that someone leaving you does not mean your life is over. I placed the key in the lock and opened the door. This time, the house was not silent. Inside, I heard women laughing and speaking with hope in their voices. I stepped across the threshold. The man who had once tried to remove me from this home was no longer part of my life, but I was still here, in my home, in my life, in the future I had chosen. Sometimes when someone tells you to leave, they believe they are leaving you powerless. But sometimes that moment reminds you who you truly are. Daniel thought he could force me out of the house. In the end, he was the one who left. And the house was not the only thing that belonged to me. My life had always belonged to me too.